Fucked up.
Okay, I think we're live, dude. Let me just check in the group. What's up, everyone? If we're live, I'm just gonna confirm here. Yep, we are live, guys. So I have someone special. If you guys are on the replay, comment hashtag replay so I can know who's watching this. Give you guys some love. I have someone really special here. This is the type of guy, the type of knowledge he has. Like you'll only meet these people in person, and I'm pretty lucky that I met him in person recently at an event about a week ago, right? Dream
Yeah,
100.
just over a week ago. What's up,
And you know
Facebook?
what's funny? I'm wearing this shirt too.
Dream 100 Con. Somebody tag Brunson and Dana Derricks.
David Derricks. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you were actually one of the first people I spoke to. I don't know if you remember when I first got to the hotel the night before. I saw Peter Prue at the bar, and then he was talking. You guys were talking to each other. I just sat down, introduced myself, and immediately, right when you started talking, I'm like, this guy. Like I was throwing out some names and some topics. I'm like, whoa, like you were dropping some knowledge bombs. I was like, how do you know these people? How do you have this knowledge? Like, who are you talking to? Like that type of stuff.
Well, thanks for having me. It's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So it's gonna be. I'm excited for people to like get to know you because they probably can't get to know you anywhere else if they wanted to. And I think you do that purposely, right? Like you're behind the scenes. That's what you like.
I
Right?
prefer to be behind the scenes. I'm not a very searchable person. You're not going to find some website of me touting my laurels. You're not going to find me slinging business cards at events or really actually personally very active on social media. So it's fun. You know, when you asked me to come on and talk, brother, I actually got really excited because I do enjoy this sort of thing. I just don't make a point to do it very often. So I appreciate
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I mean, we connected a few nights. We went out drinking a few nights and we had some fun. So this interview is more of like I just want to get to know you more and have because in these conversations we had, I'm like, man, if people were hearing this, like this could be valuable for someone else. So people who are watching live, you can just be like kind of a bird on the wall, or what do they call it? Fly on the wall, a bird on the wall, a fly on the wall.
Birds hang out on walls too, right?
Yeah, I guess if it's like a woodpecker or something. But what's up, Felicia? Thanks for tuning in. So real quick, just so people get an understanding of what you've done, what you do, like, where are you at right now? Like, you can go back as far as you want. Like, what's your story?
Um, so I'm gonna skip all the pre-direct response stuff because probably not very interesting. But I'm based here in Austin, Texas. Austin, born and raised, and there's a really powerful entrepreneur community here, and I've been fortunate enough to befriend and learn from a lot of people. And so I want to, just start this in appreciation for everyone that has helped me get to this point in my life. And I had the good fortune of working on quite a few different projects spanning quite a few verticals, supplements, eco green living, survival, water filtration, finance, payment processing, fitness, weight loss, real estate, the whole nine yards. So my story definitely still not done yet, and I'm looking forward to what's going to happen in the future. But at the moment, I'm the wizard behind the curtains for the number one motivation mindset podcast on iTunes, MWF Motivation with Rob Dial. And that has been just a fantastic journey. And that's what started us talking and kind of why I'm here today. So
Yeah.
before that, go ahead.
Okay. Real quick, how did you guys link up?
Referred by somebody else in the Austin community. So again, just very fortunate, like, our skill sets mesh, and he gets to operate in his genius zone and being on camera and really spreading a positive message. And I get to operate in my genius zone behind the scenes, writing and helping make everything happen. So I'm blessed to be involved with that and past projects. That's been the role that I take. So
Cool. So that's where you're at now. Like right now, is that your main focus right now? The podcast, or okay.
He mostly handles the podcast side of things. I handle circulatory traffic, help out with the messaging, the systems. So together we craft a overarching message. And Before that, I had the good fortune to work with a close friend of mine building a water filtration business. So we got to help a lot of people doing that and help people drink clean water, give back through different charity venues and organizations, especially geared towards helping children drink clean water, because there's so many people around the world that just don't have access or have very poor quality water. So the last couple of years have been exciting, and I've been very fortunate. So
Yeah, that's one of my biggest, like, one of the charities I donate to, as well as Charity Water, which I'm sure you've heard of, because I feel like that's the easiest thing to solve and it's the most foundational. It's so important. Like, we take for granted like how easy it is to get water, but like people in Africa, like they're walking miles every day just to like drink. Like, to me, that's insane that it's still going on. But
yeah.
I want to so we're gonna be sharing some cool stuff, guys. Peter, and he kind of like blew my mind when he was sharing it with me. He's going to go over, and you guys can ask questions during the live if you want, while he's here, ask him questions. He knows a lot of stuff. But he's going to go over right here, the 9 insights to circulatory traffic. So, you guys can apply this for your podcast or literally like anything you're doing online pretty much, right?
Yep, definitely. So, I don't know who's going to end up watching this or who's going to end up being on the live. So I'm just going to go over some fundamental things that I've found and in my experience have been very helpful. The first of which is creating a roadmap for yourself and being very clear on your objectives. And a lot of times it's easy to get overwhelmed or get hung up on, I have to create a podcast episode, or, I've got to post something on this social media channel, right? It's really easy to get caught up in the doing and lose sight and lose clarity on the overarching objective, right? Obviously, with any social media channel or any podcast, like the idea is to get your message out, right? And so that means as many ears and eyeballs on whatever it is that you're talking about. So number one, first and foremost, is be clear on your intention and be clear on what you're trying to accomplish. Because if you can't clearly identify, if you can't say it in a sentence or two, they're never going to get it. So that's step one. And sometimes it's easy to start something with intention and be clear on what you want and what you're trying to accomplish, and then lose that over time. So I find that the easiest way to stay on track is like 30-day evaluations, right? And just sit down and say, what are my objectives? Are they still true from the last month going into the next month? And if so, am I accomplishing that? Am I building towards that?
Yeah. What's up, Ryan? What's up, Felicia? Felicia wants to know all the things, by the way, Peter. So don't hold back. Yeah, she wants to know everything. Like, where's your address now?
Stalking.
What's up, Ryan, dude? Thanks for tuning in. Ryan Helms, he's crushing it right now with this podcast. So I'm sure Peter can give you some tips here. So that was step one, kind of the roadmap and getting clear on objectives. So you said the 30-day evaluation. Are you kind of like evaluating your KPIs, I guess?
So metrics are always super important, because they're telling you if your energy expenditure is actually yielding results, right? No matter what it is across the board, if you're doing anything and the metrics are telling you it's not working, you have decisions to make, right? Do you pour your energy and time into something that is completely different? Do you tweak and continue? Like, without metrics, you're never going to get anywhere, right? So it's part KPIs, but it's also part like, does this message still resonate with my initial objective? Is that objective still the objective, right? And then, it's taking that data and seeing, okay, well, does the audience feel that way, right? Because you can sit there, it's the old joke of, you can sit there and write 1,000 blog posts, but if nobody reads them, you're just journaling. Go write in a journal. So
that's very true. Yeah.
If no one's reading them, if your message isn't getting out there, or people aren't responding to it at all, then you got to make some changes, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. So clearly you don't want to do that, because it's a huge waste of time and energy.
Yeah. What are your biggest, I'm sure it's pretty obvious with podcasting, when you guys started out, what were you guys measuring for? Was it downloads? Was it the guest you want, as far as the people you want to reach out to? Like, what was it?
So downloads are like the king of KPI for a lot of people. But so Rob actually started the channel before he and I partnered up and has done an incredible job. And that's his genius zone, right? And my genius zone is the circulatory side of things. Like, how does that play with all the other platforms, right? And then is the messaging congruent throughout the rest? So these days, I'm not really focused on, oh, how many downloads did we get on the podcast, right? Like, it's great. Like, I'm all for more the merrier, but like at the end of the day, like it all boils down to does it resonate with people? Do they take action, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm more focused on the metrics of people's response and seeing, okay, well, here's where the messaging made sense to people. Here's where it wasn't congruent. Here's where people fell off, right? And what actions did they take? Because that helps me build, right? And it helps me create, and it helps me get the message out there even more. So those are the things I focus on.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, and the goal is to build I forget what book it's from, build your 1,000 raving fans. Because then once you have that, then your business can survive off that. And you guys have obviously surpassed that.
So moving on to the second thing that
real quick. Felicia, I don't know if you just answered this, but she said, she asked, what would be an effective KPI to implement to get your podcast out there? Assuming it's downloads, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like.
She says out there. I don't know what she means by out there, but yeah.
I'm not sure exactly what, and maybe rephrase the question, and we'll do our best to answer it. But it's kind of like, with Facebook, you can't take likes and followers to the bank, right? So it's all about what action is tied to their level of social media engagement. But the number one metric for Facebook, for example, is the share, right? You want to get in as many news feeds as possible, and you want the algorithm to recognize that people are engaging with it, and then generate a snowball effect. So hopefully,
she said reach set / downloads.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, let's go into tip number 2 or insight number 2.
So one of the big mistakes that I've seen across the board and been guilty of myself is trying to cram people into a one size fit all, like putting people in a box. And one of the worst ways you can go about doing that is assuming that they're going to want whatever it is that you're putting out there because it makes sense in your mind. Like, don't get too attached to your own ideas when you're creating. And I found that the easiest way to do that and to gauge people's responsiveness is creating bite-sized consumable content pieces. It doesn't always have to be a 30-minute VSL or some long form or an hour-long episode or whatever. And you don't need, like, the actions tied to that need to be reflective of the audience's response, right? So you don't want to say, okay, well, I'm immediately going to shove you into this thing that maybe you weren't ready for. It's figuring out where they're at along the scale of awareness. And I found that if you can give them lots of little, like, breadcrumbs, if you will, along the trail to figure out like what they actually want, then you'll be able to craft a more powerful message and deliver the value that they actually need. They might not know they need it, but they might go in wanting something else, but you're going to deliver what they need, right? And you can't do that if you haven't figured out what it is, right? So I find that bite-sized little, and they can be anything from like 1 to 3 minute videos, quick, like 10-minute episodes, 500 words here and there, consistency of email, whatever it is, whatever approach you're taking. It really boils down to, is it a massive undertaking, and does it take a lot of their time and energy, or is it something small that builds the relationship between you, right?
Gotcha. So, how does that process come to fruition for you? Is it like, what platforms are you utilizing for that? Like, because I'm sure every platform, you don't do the content the same and the strategy is a little different.
Sure. So yeah. I'm big on Facebook and over email, and then sending like traditional direct response approach and sending people straight to landing pages with, embedded videos and long form so that they can absorb it at their own rate instead of spreading myself too thin across too many platforms. So I've never been like a huge Twitter guy. I've never been a huge Instagram guy. We do have 50 some odd thousand people on Instagram, but it's not really my genius zone, so I don't operate in it very often. But whatever it is that you find is most effective, again, going back to the metrics, is, what you just have to, at the end of the day, consider like how thin do I want to go, right? How much do I want to spread myself thin?
Gotcha. So yeah, we can get into
number 3.
yeah.
Focusing on different channels. The long and short is, you have there's so many options these days. And if you want to focus on Twitch or Facebook, or just capture email and send people emails, or if you want to run Facebook traffic and send them to pages, if you want to just focus on the podcast, like you can't just pick one these days. Like, you have to have a follow-up. In order to create circulatory traffic, you have to have multiple channels. The danger that I've found is that people try to do too much, and then they end up doing things very poorly because they're not going into it with a full mind or with enough energy, right? And so they're spread thin, and it becomes a chore instead of something that they're passionate about. So that's the number one downfall I've seen, is people thinking they have to do something. And the reality is that that's just a misconception that people have been fed. So identify which platforms you want to use, which channels you want to use, and you find are most effective. And effective in this sense, meaning how much people respond on those platforms, and then take it from there. And once you've got, a presence on those platforms built up, then, you're good to go, and you can move on to the next one. You can start adding them on. Russell Brunson talked about this at the event last weekend, where he's like, don't go too wide, start out with 2 or 3. And once you have built those up and systematized them, and they are on course with your vision, right? Going back to figuring out and being clear on what your objectives are, then you can start expanding, right? But if you go too wide, too quick, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot.
Yeah. I mean, I see that too with people starting, how it literally gives them anxiety attacks, because they're like, how do I do this for YouTube and Facebook and Instagram? Yeah. And it's just like, it's just like causing inaction, which is you never want to be in that state.
Done. You'll hear this all over the direct response world. Done is always better than perfect. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're just getting started on anything, whether it's a podcast or drumming up a presence on a social media platform, just realize that it's okay. It's never going to be perfect, especially when you're first getting started. But don't take on too much, or you're going to drown. So.
Yeah, I have a quote on my wall too. It says, perfectionism is the fear of failure disguised as a high standard. So
I like that.
Cool. So that was number 3. Let's get into juicy part number 4.
So number 4 is kind of an addendum to number 3, which is time and energy. And if you know me at all, those are the 2 resources I believe you can never get more of. You can never generate more time, right? Unless you happen to be a time wizard. But so what that means for you is, kind of going back to not going too wide too quick, is I found that some of the most effective tools are time blocking, right? And being intentional with your time, just like you would with your relationships, right? So recognizing what you want to do and then implementing, those are obviously 2 very different things. And for those not currently time blocking, I highly recommend it. Sit down with intention and say, I devote this amount of time to this endeavor, right? And that way you reduce the overwhelm, but you're also creating faster. You're being more efficient, more effective with your time. There's a lot of different tools out there. I'm not going to start listing off tools, but like some of the favorites for project management, Asana is my favorite for being intentional in community. Blocking things out on Google Calendar is the fastest way for me. Whatever works for you, just find what works for you. Test everything out, like whether it's Time Doctor, Asana, whatever. There's lots of different tools out there to help you be efficient and effective, but you're never going to get more time and energy, right? So you have to be intentional with what you have and figure out how things build, right? So you can't just say, okay, I'm going to put together, it's like Legos. You can't just build 2 or 3 little Lego pieces and say, okay, it's done. No, if you're building a spaceship out of Legos, you have to assemble all 87 pieces, right? And so every day you have 1,000 micro decisions, right? I'm going to drink this cup of coffee or go here, or talk to this person or whatever it is. Every single day you have 1,000 micro decisions. And the question, the reflective question that I like to ask at the end of each day and the end of each week is, how did those micro decisions build towards the larger picture, right? And so that's what I would recommend, is getting into that practice. Like, use whatever tools you need that work for you, for your projects, for your personal life, etc. But at the end of the day, it's all about that process of reflection and figuring out, okay, did this serve me, right? Because at the end of the day, you can do lots of things, but if it wasn't useful, if it didn't serve your greater goals, then you're not actually building, you're just spending time instead of being intentional with it. So that's what I recommend.
Yeah, and I would have to say too that that's so important, because like that, honestly, that's just, it creates momentum when you're like doing the right things in the right order, because it can go the other way. Like, for example, this morning I didn't spend the first few hours to write because I was dealing with like personal problems first rather than being intentional about my day, and then that, you know, kind of snowballed into other things, and then I had to catch up for the rest of my day. So yeah, that's super important. Do you are you kind of like time blocking in the beginning of the day, or like for the week? Like, how do you time block?
So what I find is that, you know, it depends on what your objectives are, but throughout the day I say, okay, well, I want to reach out to this. I break down by category, right?
Yeah.
My personal, professional, and then self-development. So self-development could be working out, eating healthy, reading, you know, taking a nap. I'm a big nap guy.
Yeah, I love naps. We got Mark on, by the way. Mark Stern, guys.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, thanks for being here, dude. Clickpreneur Summit, guys. Make sure it's free right now, I'm pretty sure, right? If you sign up and watch it live.
Post a link later for Mark because he's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Mark is beyond. Yeah, we had a fun time that night on the rooftop.
Yeah. So you know, to summarize, you know, be intentional with how you approach your day and your week, and the best ways to move forward and not get discouraged, because like we talked about, that negative energy is a very real thing. Like, if you get down on yourself and you say, well, I didn't accomplish everything I wanted to, I didn't build the way I wanted to, then you're going to end up, you know, having an inverse effect. So I find the most important piece of the whole process is just being reflective and taking the time at the end of the day and at the end of the week, end of the month, whatever works for you. But that's what works for me is in those three stages, asking myself hard questions like, did I accomplish what I wanted to accomplish? Where are we at? How am I measuring things? Because just like with social media presence or creating a podcast, for example, it's all about how you measure backwards, right? So measuring backwards, huge.
Yeah, huge. Dude, I love your approach, because I was expecting you to be tactical, but you're way like more philosophical, which is important, because
we'll get into some nitty gritty tactics here in a minute.
No. I think both are important, but this is the foundation to, like, you know, this is stuff that could be carried on for the rest of your life, you know?
Yeah. It's like what we talked about. How you do one thing is how you do everything, right? And so if you set up these parameters, these systems for how you approach life, like if you're in the right mindset, like, I'm not going to let this setback set me back. I'm going to take that energy. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to build every single day with those 1,000 micro decisions that I'm given, and view each day in appreciation. Then all you're going to do is have the energy to create, right? That's how you prevent yourself from slipping into a slippery slope of negative energy. So, right, let's move into some of the more tactical stuff. You ready?
Yeah, man. I'm up for it.
Cool. So couple of tips and tricks. I'll just roll like 5, 6, 7 kind of into a long-winded rant, and anybody post comments if you want, and we'll answer your questions. So as far as, regardless of which channels you're using, like obviously the big one is Facebook, and one of the best circulatory platforms, especially for podcasts, because podcasts are full of ravenous followers, right? If you think about a podcast you like, if you like a podcast, you love it, right? And you're probably listening to it a whole bunch, right? You might have a couple that are the occasional listen, but at the end of the day, you're probably snatching up every single episode that the host is putting out. So, at the end of the day, going back to number one, you have to figure out what the purpose of the podcast is overall, and then figure out, okay, where do they go from here, right? You don't want anybody just saying, oh, that was a cool podcast, and then poof, disappear into the void. You want to give them, like I said, small measurable steps that they can take so you can track their progress along the awareness scale and figure out how much they know about you, what their relationship to you is, and if they're responding and engaging with any of the content that you're putting out there, right? So in my mind, that can be anything from what we call ethical bribes in direct response, like very simple things that can be like, hey, give us your information and we'll reward you with these templates, these downloads, exclusive video content, podcast episode that nobody else is getting unless they give us this information, that sort of thing. And the idea is, you want people to take lots of little micro actions. Ezra Firestone talks about this quite a bit, where, their whole messenger bot program is built around the idea of, we're going to make you go through 6 different steps to get the 25% off coupon for our honey products, is the main example that he uses at all his talks. And, the interesting thing about that is, in the world of on-demand, a lot of brands have focused less and less on building consistent customer loyalty and making the immediate sale, right? And so even if you're selling a product, like if you want them to join a program, or you have a physical product or whatever it is, or service, then, at the end of the day, you're going to want them to take action. But in my experience, you don't want to just shove them into a little cookie cutter mold and send them to a sales page or what have you. Ideally, what you want to do is build that relationship. And so that way they open all your emails, they open all your messages, they're listening to every podcast, they're checking out your social media presence, they're sharing your content. The idea is to build multiple digital assets simultaneously without overwhelming yourself, right? And so the initial premise is, how do I reward people for their time and attention? Because their time and attention is very valuable, right? So thanking people, rewarding them is like the 101s, right? You don't treat people that give you their time and attention like garbage, right?
Yeah.
That's one, not how you treat human beings, but also, like, out of respect for their time and attention, you want to provide them with quality content. You want to provide them with great follow-up. You want to educate, inform, bestow, whatever the idea is. At the end of the day, you're trying to give, deliver as much value as possible. And so there's a lot of ways to go about that. But if you keep that in the forefront of your mind when you're creating your content, when you're building up your social media presence, when you're recording a podcast episode, when you're trying to figure out what your offers should be, then you're going to be just fine. If you put them first and you lead with value, I guarantee things will work out.
Yeah. Because honestly, what I'm hearing feedback. Hello?
I'm here.
All right, cool. I was hearing feedback for a second. We're good. Honestly, like, you can kind of measure what's. I was listening to a podcast episode recently with Stephen Larson, and he was saying how the episode was called "Selling is Emotional."
Yeah.
But he was saying how there's different ways to trigger different brain chemicals in people's mind, and that's what gets them, connected to you. Like, how are you triggering dopamine in their mind? How are you triggering serotonin? How are you triggering endorphins? Endorphins is like when you give them homework to do and they get quick wins, like almost like when you go work out and you feel good after. Like, sure. People will connect those endorphins to you, and like the dopamine's like the quick thing, and the serotonin is like status. Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up, because the interesting thing about that is, in the world of on-demand dopamine, right? Oh, somebody liked my stuff on Facebook, or somebody.
It's pretty bad now. It's really bad, actually. Yeah.
Oh, weird.
No. I'm saying like that people are like,
Oh, I thought you meant the feedback. Sorry. Yeah. So, this whole problem of dopamine release is created this culture of inactive or non-appreciation, right? And so the real question is, how do you stand out and how do you deliver value to people who are so used to getting stuff on demand? And that's a great point. The homework angle is great for anybody, and that can be true across platforms, whether it's in a private Facebook group, on a podcast episode, through email, whatever. If you give people little micro actions, again, going back to the chewable content and 1,000 daily decisions, if you give them little steps to take, they're going to, one, love you more for it, but they're also going to absorb more of your content. And then, it's the whole contrast of asking for a sale, like when it comes time to promoting something, which in my experience, a lot of podcasts, for example, are eventually trying to push people towards something larger. And if it's just an educational podcast, that's totally fine. But at the end of the day, you want them interacting because then they're educating themselves even more. So if you take some of these strategies and you implement them, then your subscriber base is going to be more appreciative and they're going to engage a lot more. So, regardless of how you approach it, whether you reward them, whether it's like free giveaways or access to exclusive content, or you wrote a PDF or what have you, like all these little ethical bribes for their time and attention is just nurturing that relationship. And so the more, obviously the objective is the more that they absorb your content, the more they're going to want to continue to absorb your content, right? And so that's where the metrics side of things comes into play, and it's really important because if the metrics are telling you that, okay, well, up until on touch point 1, 2, and 3, they interacted, they visited this page, they opened that email, they downloaded this video, what have you, then that tells you that they're good up until that point. But if you're seeing a significant drop off between 3, 4, and 5, then you know that either your order is wrong and whatever's in the 4th slot shouldn't be there, or the way there's some disconnect between your messaging. So consistency in message is key. At the end of a podcast episode or throughout it, for example, you want to subtly remind them of something that you're going to mention at the end, like, hey, at the end, I'll tell you a little bit more about my free 5-day program, like a free challenge to improve your mindset, or here's my 5 productivity hacks, and I'll give that to you at the end, right? Not only does that make them want to listen towards the end, or same thing in video, watch to the end, but you're also rewarding them for that time and energy, right? And so I find like that's the best way to deal with this dopamine release society is, hey, go through and actually be thankful and appreciative of people and respect their time and energy. And no matter which approach you take on which platform, if you're thinking about them first and delivering the best quality content, you're going to succeed.
Awesome. What would you say right now? Because I'm sure you guys are in a flow. You guys are in a comfortable state with the podcast, I'm sure, right? Like, are you guys like pushing for new boundaries, or are you just kind of like cruising along?
The main, one of the things, like Instagram is really popping right now. And you'll see a lot of direct response guys, a lot of influencers talking about increasing their Instagram game. Like I said earlier, it's not really my forte. Yeah. So to be honest and fully transparent, like I'm excited to get more into that because I think it's
Instagram, and that's what I've been telling people right now. Like that's how I grew my podcast, is straight through Instagram, because like the people you can interview who are big on Instagram, who are in your niche. They'll shout you out on Instagram, so it's like easy traffic right now.
Yeah. Well, one of the other considerations though is putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Because Facebook owns Instagram. So diversification of your assets is super important. That's why people build email lists to mail. You've got bot subscribers, your Facebook pages, your Instagram account, your podcast, your YouTube channel, Twitch, whatever it is that you're doing, like settle on it, but just try not to put too many eggs in one basket. Because I know, regardless of platform, if the only asset that you have is your podcast, then what happens if you get shut down, right? Like
Yeah.
what if it reported too much for whatever reason? Same thing. Like if you were advertising on YouTube and they changed the game, and now all of a sudden you're making most of your money on YouTube, or your account got banned. You hear it all the time with Facebook advertisers is, they're running traffic on Facebook to different offers and promoting different pages. And then all of a sudden their accounts get shut down, and there's not much you can do about it in a lot of circumstances. So on the one hand of building your objective and creating the most value, you have to think about how, what the metrics say about how you're delivering that, because those are all just vehicles of delivery, right? And so you want to get your message out there as much as possible, but you don't want to put too many eggs in one basket. So like I said, start 2 or 3 at a time, and then add just 1 at a time. Don't try to do, Twitch and Twitter at the same time if you haven't already been working on those platforms. So that's what I would recommend, which moves me into the next thing, which is don't be afraid to ask. Right? Don't be afraid to ask people what they want. Put out polls, put out surveys, ask open-ended questions, right? Ask a series of leading questions and say, how can I best serve you, right? Here's what I'm thinking for content this month. Would you rather hear about this, or this, right? And then that'll help you, that'll guide you into giving them what they didn't know they needed, right? Because they might not know that they needed something. And then you ask the question and they're like, oh, yeah, I would love to hear about that, or I'd love to learn more about that. So that's huge. Like I can't emphasize how big that is. Like asking the right questions. Sometimes all it is just a subtle 1% shift, just a little reframe. And before you know it, you have people crazy excited, and you've got your metrics are through the roof because people are responsive to the fact that you're one of the few people actually asking them what they want. And sometimes they don't know. And sometimes it's an exploratory process, but that's totally fine, because when you ask those questions, you're teaching yourself, you're educating them, you're giving them a chance to engage, but by asking the right kinds of questions and asking them frequently, you'll figure out what it is that you want to create, right? Because something they say will resonate with what you had in your heart and your mind. And then you'll think, I didn't know I wanted to create that. And now I'm going to create it because that sparked the idea, right? So it's kind of like the reflective process. Consistency is king, number 1. 2, if you don't already have a list of questions that you ask yourself on a weekly basis, and then separately another list of questions to ask your audience, you're only going to shoot yourself in the foot. Like you have to ask yourself questions and them questions frequently, so that you're on the right track, right? Because it's easy to get derailed. But that's what I've found to be the most effective way to not run into any obstacles and to keep on the creative process. Like keep flowing. And the easiest way to keep flowing is be clear on what you want to create. And the easiest way to be clear on what you want to create, I've found, is asking people questions, getting feedback.
It's interesting you say that, because that's kind of where the stage I'm at. I just created like a Google form today. It's like it's a little lengthy. It's like about 10 questions, but I'm not gonna do this a lot. But I'm gonna be giving away like a freebie to everyone in the group. People who are hearing this, you're gonna get it soon. Just a freebie, spoiler alert, breaking news. But it's gonna be like a good freebie. But it's gonna help me. I know how important that is, like asking people, because this is what I tell people who start podcasts. It sucks to have passive listeners, because then if you don't have that feedback, you don't know what's working, what they like. Like if you don't give them a place to engage or to give you feedback or to like ask questions or to connect with people, like a Facebook group or something, then you're going to miss that engagement. And that's your oxygen, the people who listen to you. So
yeah. And, it doesn't necessarily always have to be a series of leading questions or some kind of survey. Like it literally can be just analyzing the data of, okay, well, if you have a call to action on everything, at the end of every podcast episode, at the end of every Facebook Live, on each Facebook post, like it doesn't have to be a huge push towards, hey, go do this thing. That's huge, right? They can be little micro decisions like, hey, just go read this blog post that I did over here, or watch this video I did over on YouTube, or what have you, right? And so there's no specific formula, but it's always giving people the option, because they can't say yes if you don't give them something to say yes to, right? And so if they don't have anything to say yes to, then every day that you're not actively building a relationship with your audience is a day that by default is subtracting from their relationship, right? You're either nurturing or you're letting it fall by the wayside. Same is true in real life with your interpersonal relationships. The same is true, with your self-development, right? If you stop reading books, if you stop journaling, if you stop educating yourself in whatever form, podcasts, shows, what have you, whatever it is that you do to better yourself, if you stop doing that and you neglect yourself, then you're clearly not nurturing yourself. You're letting yourself fall by the wayside. So the same is true with any audience across any platform. So always have call to actions. It's kind of crazy that I have to say it, but like I see a lot of big brands that just don't have call to actions. They don't take advantage and don't perpetuate circulatory traffic, probably because they're not clear on the congruency of the message across platforms, right? So they're like, oh, well, I've got my podcast over here and I've got my YouTube channel over here and I've got a Facebook page, and then they don't really interact with each other very much. They don't sync up. They're not getting people to respond, to engage in them frequently. And so, consistency really is king. Like the people say content is king, and that's true because people want to receive the value that you have to deliver, but you're not nurturing effectively if it's sporadic, if it's inconsistent, and if it's not, if you're continuing to do things that the metrics don't reflect. Like if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, well, I know if I just do the same thing, I'll get there eventually. No, people don't, like the metrics are saying you aren't resonating. If you're not resonating, stop, do something different, try something else. Don't go crazy wide. Don't try to do everything on every social media platform, but take a different approach, because if they're not listening to you, or they're not watching you, or they're not reading your content, they're doing it for somebody else. So
yeah, I see what you're saying. You mentioned earlier how like Facebook is big for you guys. Is that your fan page, or are you guys utilizing personal profiles at all?
Not personal. That's a fan page. We just hit a million people following that page a couple weeks ago. So that's been a crazy fun journey.
How's that? Because you have a perspective that I would say 99.9% of people don't have, probably more than that. How is like,
I wouldn't be me otherwise.
Yeah. How do you feel like your reach is on Facebook compared to, the past few months or before that?
So Facebook, and, if you're following like how the algorithm's been working the last couple months, like, you'll hear a lot of people lashing out in frustration. And I found that the easiest way to go about getting people to engage is just getting them to say yes. A lot of times, like very small, say for instance, if you're doing a Facebook Live, getting people to comment below in stopping and asking questions like, hey, I just talked for 5 minutes about a concept. Does that make sense? Comment, yes, that makes sense below, or whatever, right? And because the objective is just to get into as many people's news feeds as possible, right? The more eyeballs, the more ears that you have, the better off you're going to be. So how do you do that? Like, how do you overcome some of these algorithmic challenges? And the step one obviously is delivering value that people want to receive, having great content and communicating it through a vehicle of delivery that works for them, that resonates with them. And that goes back to the metrics thing, right, that we talked about. And then two is getting them, just like with going back to the micro decisions conversation, it's getting them to interact a whole bunch of little times throughout your Facebook Live, or posting. It doesn't have to be huge, complex things. Like we do a lot of meme posting, ask a lot of questions on the page, and, get people to just comment, because those comments and shares are the two biggest factors for Facebook's algorithm. Is like, hey, how can we ensure that people actually want this in their newsfeed? And so the number one thing you could do for Facebook is get shares, right? And so and a lot of that is simple, like, hey, Facebook Live, for example, hey, as soon as you get on, hey, everybody's on. Okay, go ahead and do me a quick favor. Just ask them to share it. Ask them to comment below. Most of the time, people will, if they are receiving value from you, they'll give back, right? If they don't feel like they're receiving value, they're going to not listen or watch your stuff anyway, right? So
Yeah.
don't be afraid to ask, because when you do ask, it allows you to build upon that. So like mini series are a big thing that I'm working on right now, is creating, like I said, micro absorbable, chewable content that people care about, that resonates with them. And that, the start of that process is getting them to engage and asking them questions so that they say yes a whole bunch of little times, kind of like with the Ezra Firestone thing. They say yes for Ezra's stuff 6 or 7 times before they're even given the initial thing, right? Like if it's a coupon, they have to say yes 6 or 7 times and visit a couple pages and click on a thing in Messenger bot and what have you, right? Like go through all these hoops to get what they want. But that pre-qualifies them so that when they actually get to the point where they're able to receive, they're ready for it. They want it. They're hungry for it, right? Because ideally, the people that engage with your content, those are your evangelists. Those are the people that are going to tell their friends, their family, everybody. If they've got a network or an audience, they're going to go share your stuff around. Again, boils down to eyes and ears. You want as many people viewing and listening. So those are the people, your evangelists. Like, take care of them, take care of people, but take care of the people that engage with you really well, and don't be afraid to ask frequently. So when you do that, they're going to respond positively because you've nurtured that relationship. You've taken care of them. You've delivered great podcast episodes. You've, asked thoughtful questions on Facebook. You've done great Facebook Lives, etc., sent out daily emails or whatever it is, whatever vehicle of delivery that you're operating with. If you're doing that and the consistency is there and the value is there, the response will be there.
Boom. Hold up. I gotta write. I'm just writing a note. I love it, dude. Hey Shay, thanks for tuning in. I think she's in Australia, dude. So
wow.
New Zealand, correct me if I'm wrong, Shay. So she's her time is pretty funky right now, I'm sure. It's probably super early. If you guys, I see we have 3 viewers. If you're on, give me #TeamLive. If you have any questions for Peter while we have his time, shoot him down below. This guy knows way more than you think he knows. So I kind of want to ask you, and if you guys have questions, just ask. I want to ask you about copywriting, because I've been noticing more and more as I'm like building things online and I'm trying to like build a course and such, how important copywriting is for everything. Like for like creating content, for headlines, like for the whole process. So
there's a common misconception when it comes to the word copywriting. Copywriting is just effectively communicating what you're trying to convey, right? And the art of persuasion is all about giving people what they didn't know they need but wanted. Does that make sense? Like, sometimes people don't know what they actually need, and they think they go into a situation wanting something, and that gives you an opportunity to over deliver. And so, the thing about writing is, whether you're writing emails, blog posts, you're writing a script, you're outlining your podcast episode, whatever the thing is, all you have to do, in my experience, is 2 things. 1, put yourself in the listener or the viewer's shoes or the reader's shoes and think, how would I receive this? Am I going to appreciate the way this is written, or the way this video is shot, or the way this episode is recorded, right? And then 2, talk to people like you would your friend at the bar. Copywriting legend John Carlton says it. Talk to people like they're your buddy at the bar. And that way, anybody from a 7-year-old to an 80-year-old can understand you, right? Nobody wants to talk to the person they can't understand. Like if you use a whole bunch of jargon that people don't get, or if you're diving into concepts without prefacing, making sure that people understand what you're trying to say, using the right terminology so that it's clear to them, so that anyone can understand it. Like the whole concept of copywriting is dumbing down language and making it appealing. Now you have technical copywriting, it's different, but like at the end of the day, mass copy intended for wide audiences is copy written so that anybody can glean the information, right? Because you're trying to convey information and they want to receive it. But if you make it difficult for them to understand, for them to follow, for them to resonate with, right? If you were just writing from an unempathetic, like unemotional place, you're only shooting yourself in the foot, because everybody wants to be entertained, be educated, connect, right? And develop that relationship. And so the key I've found in my writing is, what would I want to read? What would I want to listen to? What would I want to watch? And putting myself in a place of thinking about them and putting them first allows me to get into flow and write more effectively.
Okay, gotcha. I love it. I love it. She said 7:50 a.m. by the way.
You're gonna have to watch the replay. I think we've pretty much run through all the questions.
Yeah. She told me she was gonna watch the replay. Thanks for tuning in, Shay. You're a trooper. So I'm about to shoot 3 questions your way. These questions might sound familiar. You might know these questions, but all right. So number 1, I see you got a nice little bookshelf behind you. Are those all your books that you got?
It's some of them. Yeah, I'm in my library.
So, boom. This is a surprise question. What's like the number 1, like, what is your go-to book that's changed your life and you still think about to this day, where you can still read it and get some nuggets from it?
Oh man, that's a hard question. It's actually not in. It's actually in the goofier like sci-fi realm, because when I first read this book, it like really opened up some of the ways that I perceive the creative process, and it's actually, believe it or not, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by
Dude, I for some reason I knew you were gonna say that. Like, I was thinking of that book, dude. Wow. So I've read your mind across
a lot of great books, like across multiple different topics, but I just, when I think about the one book that just makes me smile every time I think about it, there's so many great like implementation, self-help, educational books. This one is just silly. It is just absurd. And I love it for that. So
is it like the imagination factor, how it opened up?
Just kind of blows your mind, and think some guy sat down and wrote something so absurd and so goofy. And I love that. It really, thinking about things like that, it's kind of like the thing, like people watch cat videos or whatever it is to entertain them. But like when you're in that state of dopamine release, and especially if it facilitates a lot of creative functionality in your brain, then like I find I do little stuff like that right before I write, or want to like brainstorm on anything creative. Because I'm like, if I'm in a goofy, silly state and I'm happy and I'm smiling, like I take that energy and I think, then I move into the process of, okay, what can I create? How much value can I deliver to the people that are trying to receive it?
I love that. I love that cover of the book is like always in my mind too. Like they did a good job of that book. I never finished it because it was long. It was a big book.
Yeah, it's huge.
I wasn't that much of a reader, so I was like the type of guy who read Captain Underpants. I don't know if you remember that. So I got another question here for you.
Sure.
What is, I mean, you're probably a little biased, but what is like your number 1 podcast, or what are you obsessed with right now as far as a podcast right now?
I'm always obsessed with Joe Rogan.
Okay, like all this stuff. Joe Rogan's everywhere. Like he's in MMA, and then he's in like psychedelics, and then he's everywhere.
All of it. I also like MMA, but yeah, some of the Joe Rogan podcast is probably.
You're his ideal listener.
Yeah, I'm his ideal listener. Yeah.
Yeah, he was actually the first. So quick story. He was the first person. So Joe Rogan changed my life a lot. Actually, this is weird. He had, I forget what it was. I think he interviewed Deadmau5 or something, or he was talking about Deadmau5 way like when his podcast first started, way back in the day. And I was like, who's this Deadmau5 guy? I got into Deadmau5, and then he's the one who got me into producing music. So like he got me into this weird like path. And then also talking about ayahuasca. Like I did ayahuasca once in Peru. It was because of Joe Rogan's show. Like I kept hearing about it, and I'm like, I was living the experience. I'm like, I got to do this.
That's awesome.
So he's the type of person, like if you can get to his state where you affect people's life through your podcast, like you make people like experience new things because of your podcast, like that's like awesome. And Joe's done that to a lot of people.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah, Joe's
Hit me
cool.
with that third one. What you got?
We got two more, but I'll probably just pick one.
Feedback.
So like, who's the person that changed your life the most, as far as like a mentor or someone who's like been close to you?
Uh, I'm gonna have to go ahead and give this shout out to the one, the only Ron Lynch here in Austin, Texas. He's my most profound mentor and just one of the most giving and brilliant people that I know. So I'll tag you later, Ron. But I appreciate
Is he a
for
comedian?
everything you've done. Huh?
Is he a comedian?
No, he's he's a producer and a writer. So he works. He's worked on a lot of big brands and written so much in his time, and just the way I'd say probably one of the biggest takeaways I've ever received from Ron is thinking about what it is you want and not being afraid to go after it, right? Not listening to the little voices. He's one of those people that will say, well, kind of actually along the lines of the theme of the Dream 100 Con where I met you this last weekend is, you always ask yourself the little question of, but what if it fails? What if I fail? Right. And then he's been a huge proponent in helping me flip my mindset and approaching things from, but what if I succeed? Right. What if I do accomplish that? What if I, X, Y, Z, right? Fill in the blank. So I think that's probably the most powerful mindset you could have in general is between the yes and the no's, right? Because you can focus on the negative all you want, but focusing on the positive and saying, well, what if I do succeed, right? And that's where a lot of creativity is born, like whether you're recording podcast episodes or doing a Facebook Live or writing an email or whatever it is, trying to get out to your audience and the people that need the value that you're delivering. If you have that self-doubt, if you listen to that little voice, you're failing yourself and you're failing them. And there's lessons in failure. Like that's probably the other flip to that coin is he always says, fail fast and fail upwards, right? Don't be afraid to fail, but take your failures and apply them so that you can be better, you can do better. So
I love that. Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite quotes that I've been using for a while now that's kind of in the same vein is like, what was it? You can't lose if you don't quit. Like that's something that's always stuck in my head. Like how are you going to lose if you just keep going? Like who cares if you win or not? Like you just can't lose. And that's the goal. I mean, failing happens along the way, but that's something that I like to say.
I think it's Sarah. It's Sarah Blakely, the founder and owner of Spanx, who tells a story of her father would come home for dinner, right? They'd all be around the dinner table and he'd go around and ask, okay, how did you fail today? What did you learn? Right. And so for me, that's the thing is like ever the student of life is the source of my creativity. If I see everything as an opportunity to learn something, then from there, I can take that energy and I can create. And so a lot of it's not, what should I do? Like there's all sorts of tactics across platforms, right? But at the end of the day, it's how you approach whatever it is, right? So if you lose energy to create podcast episodes or you lose energy to do a Facebook Live, your audience won't receive and you won't grow and you won't benefit. So I think having the right mindset when you're going into anything is obviously the key to the kingdom, but it all boils down to those two principles for me of time and energy. Like am I using my time well? Am I using it wisely? And how am I expending my energy? And how am I using those two principles to give back to the people in my life or in my audience, right? So
yeah, I love your mindset. I'm gonna have to listen to this again to kind of put this in my mind even more. How you I feel like you think more about the audience than yourself, which is like good. Shay, ask a questions real quick before we wrap up. If you guys have any questions before we wrap up, drop them down below. And if you made it this far, give me a hashtag Showtime, because then you're a trooper. So she asked, I help people with those little voices, and it's not even a question. I help people with those little voices, and more people are scared of success. Yep.
So that's, before we wrap up, I'll touch briefly on that. It's, the funny thing about success is the measure of it, right? How do you define success? Is it, I got this number of Facebook followers or podcast downloads or whatever? Like, how many lives? In my mind, it's how did I grow? One, right? Because you can't give if your cup is empty. Like, if you are depressed or angry or sad or whatever the thing is, unhealthy, whatever it is, like, you can't give if you have nothing to give, right? And the world needs what you have to give. Like, if you're out there creating, that's like, done is always better than perfect. Going and creating is like, getting out there and doing it is one of the biggest and hardest steps to take. So if you are out of energy and you can't give anymore, then you have to take care of yourself, get your mind right, get your body right, etc. And step 2 is, like you said, it's living in appreciation for, what I have. And when you live in that appreciation, you're able to create and to give more. And when you give, that people are drawn to that. They're attracted, like, not to get like too woo-woo or whatever, but they're attracted to the energy and the value that you're delivering. Like, that's how you build a ravenous audience, whether, regardless of platform, whether it's a podcast episode, whether you're building up a Facebook presence, whatever, Twitch following, doesn't matter, right? If people want to engage with you, they will, right? So give them a reason to do it.
Cool. So we got some hashtag showtimes. Thanks for the love, guys. Shay asked, what's one of the podcast names? Peter's MWF.
My business partner is Rob Dial is the host. MWF Motivation, Monday, Wednesday, Friday Motivation. The Facebook page is under Rob Dial Jr.
I was wondering what that stands for. Now I know.
Yeah. Monday, Wednesday,
this long to figure out. MWF Motivation. So it's literally you guys publish Monday, Wednesday, Friday?
Right. And then Facebook posts are done every day. Instagram posts done every day.
Okay. I'm going to have to funnel hack you guys a little bit. Awesome discussion, Peter and Daxy. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for staying this long, dude. I think you're on the whole time. You're a boss.
You're the winner.
You're the winner. Yeah. What do you want, dude? Like, do you want an Amazon gift card? Let me know. Cool, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Give me a hashtag Peter's awesome if you like what Peter had to say. I'm boosting this.
Thanks for letting me go on one of my rants.
Yeah. I want to recap with you probably 2 months from now or so.
Let's do it.
If that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, man. I'm going to end the broadcast here, guys, but thanks for tuning in. I have some more interviews coming. I have an interview coming tomorrow, guys, with Justin Saunders. And then on Friday, I have an interview with Andrew Deich, who has his podcast is blowing up too. So yeah, guys, take care.
Bye, guys.